Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show. My special guest today is Jack Myers, a media ecologist. Jack, thanks for joining me.
Good to be here, Aaron. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure. Okay, what is a media ecologist? I know on your website you're described as the world's leading media ecologist, and I'm thinking, what's a media? I think of bugs and things when you say ecologist.
Well, a lot of people do, and it is about the environment. Marshall McLuhan actually coined the definition of media ecologist as someone who looks at technology impacting on society, culture, but we look outside the box. We usually when we see a picture, we look inside the frame, but if that picture is hanging in a home or if it's hanging in a museum, it changes the context. So I look at media, I look at culture, and I look outside the framework to what's happening in the environment, the ecosystem that surrounds the messaging or the media community.
So who are some of your media ecologist peers? I mean, is there other media ecologists I would have heard of?
Well, Marshall McLuhan. My mentor was Dr. Neil Postman at NYU, who founded the media ecology program at NYU, at MIT, and at Cambridge.
And McLuhan was his mentor, is that correct?
McLuhan was his mentor, and of course, McLuhan wrote "The Medium is the Message," and that's been most of my career, is recognizing that not only is the media and medium the message, but the message often decides the medium. But Neil, there are a number of people who went through the program. It's now called Culture and Communications at NYU, and it's actually the largest program in the Steinhardt School at NYU in Culture and Communication.
You know, looking back on your career to date and many years to come, of course, I mean, you've described yourself as a disruptor, which is a term I love, by the way. What are some examples of kind of the disruptive activities or work you've done, and what kind of impact do you think they've had? Because certainly I think that's become even more attractive today than it was, even just 10 or 20 years ago.
Well, again, looking outside the box, as you go back to my early days, I was part of the shift from AM radio to FM and saw how the people in AM didn't believe FM would ever have a value or an impact. And then when broadcast television expanded out into cable, there were a lot of debates about whether cable would have any future value. And we continue to have those same patterns. And I always tended to look 10 to 20 years forward and to look at the technology and say, all right, assuming that's going to expand and grow, what's the impact on culture? What's the impact on the young people just being born into this technology? And how will they be different from prior generations? And I think my most important work has been at recognizing that this generation, to be born into the internet and mobile, is just a radically different. Their DNA is different. They've grown up in a different social environment, social media, and the ability to communicate globally, and as well as with their best friends and to maintain friendships. They're much more multicultural in their attitudes. They don't see gender. So looking at and studying them and recognizing how they're going to impact on our society, our culture going forward has probably been, I wouldn't call it what I'm doing disruptive as much as following the disruption.
What they're doing is disruptive.
Exactly.
You mentioned cable, and I've always been fascinated by the industry. I got involved in the industry indirectly. I actually had a short stint for the U.S. Department of Commerce in their Office of Telecommunications. I was in their policy support division and studying cable. And you look at the cable industry, I mean, when it started, you had these pioneers of cable who became
here in Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. And
Bob
these guys,
Magnus, John.
right? And people like Bob Magnus, for example, they were out stringing poles and connecting people to cable. And just like you said, a lot of folks said this is not going to go anywhere. And then, of course, it exploded. And cable now has, of course, tens of thousands, and if you include tens of millions, if you include viewers, 150 million viewers or something like that, or more than that. Now you have satellite, of course, as well.
And it's the infrastructure for the internet delivery. So
exactly.
it's been incredibly.
Right. A lot of them are losing subscribers every month, but then gaining internet, high-speed internet. What's the future of cable? What do you think? I mean, in 10 years, what do you think the cable industry will look like?
We're really at a transitional point now where we're looking at Verizon and others making a commitment to 5G, which to some extent makes cable, disrupts cable and the need for cable, the high speed, the ability to have, a full movie wirelessly transmitted in seconds as opposed to the time it takes now.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick example. I was quoted by Comcast, a ludicrous price to get cable to my house, $35,000, and that was because they weren't in the street and they had to do significant construction work to get. And so I was telling one of my team this morning, I said, should I try to get this done, or should I just wait a year for 5G? So, and I think, in a couple years.
If it's there, but there are commitments to it. The interesting thing about cable is that we have so many over-the-top options that don't require a cable. But those over-the-top options at this point tend to be Netflix here, Hulu here, CBS All Access, what Verizon and AT&T are offering, and you've got to pay for each of them. Disney, ABC with ESPN and its entertainment assets making a big commitment to over-the-top communications, which bypasses the cable operators. So we're at a technological junction or a pivotal point where the future of cable as a transportation vehicle for content is in question and in doubt, but we can't underestimate the power of the Comcasts and the Spectrums and Altice and others who are hugely invested in that cable coming into the home.
Well, and of course, a lot of them have made major moves into content as well. And I'm sure a lot of their long-term strategies include the concept that, well, if we own the content and it's only on our system, that may be a way to retain customers.
Yeah, although only on our system for Comcast and others is difficult because of regulatory environment. But that's certainly an issue, and that's one of the things that ABC decided when they pulled their content off of Netflix. They're also looking to buy Fox, which would give them 60% of Hulu. So they're
and
the
consolidate
IP,
the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Don't forget that.
consolidate, contract, but at the same time, the consumer is at the point of investment and decisions on what they're going to be able to pay for. With the cost of content becoming more and more expensive, how are customers going to be able to really select and choose rather than the big bundles they get now, and do it in a way that's cost efficient for them as well as profitable for the content providers?
Well, what's really interesting too is that there's been a long time debate about a la carte services. That should you buy, generally you've had to buy initially one bundle for a cable system. That grew into a multi-bundle option where you could buy one of 3 bundles or one of 4 bundles. But now you can buy content bundles. You mentioned Netflix, there's Hulu. The ABC move, or Disney really, which owns ABC, that move is huge in terms of the group of content
CBS
category.
All Access,
right.
yeah.
And so you could end up not being on cable, cutting the cord, but paying just as much if you're subscribing to 3 or 4 different or more services.
The challenge. And then what's most important to you? So we're going to go through a process of expansion of the number of options, but then consumers will make the choice ultimately of which ones remain profitable. We're in what I think is another golden age of television, comedy, drama, reality, talk, almost every genre you can look at, sports that's available, and available when you look at it across the spectrum at a fairly reasonable price. But the economics that are working now for many of those providers are not around subscription and around advertising revenues, are not going to be enough in 10 years to carry the number of businesses, the quality of content that we have now.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about life choices and the content we have available, because you mentioned that golden age. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Jack in just a moment.
There's more of the Aaron Harbour Show after this.
Well, I think we're going to be spending more time on screens because we'll have screens in the cars more than we do now. Screens will be ubiquitous.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbortv.com.
I'm Aaron Harbour, host of the Aaron Harbour Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
The Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harbour. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harbour Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again.
Join me and watch the Aaron Harbour Show.
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 I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch the Aaron Harbour Show and keep hope alive.
I'm Aaron Harbour, host of the Aaron Harbour Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
The Aaron Harbour Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. I'm with Jack Myers. So Jack, we've been talking about this extraordinary explosion of content that's available on our phones, our tablets, our televisions. Anywhere we go, in our cars. It's ubiquitous. It's extraordinary. The talent that is out there is amazing. The quality of some of these productions is absolutely stunning. You have minor networks creating sometimes extraordinary productions. Mm-hmm. So, and you mentioned this is the golden age of content. And what's really interesting is not only do you have this extraordinarily amazing new content, but we still have all the old content from the past, and there are cable channels and websites and services that you can get just about anything that's ever been broadcast, maybe with the exception of my show, but that's another issue. But is that really a good thing for America?
Oh, that's a great question. You went actually with that question a little differently than I thought you were going to go.
What did you think I was going to ask?
Well, I thought the question was going to be more about what's going to happen in the future with that amount of content. But is it a good thing for America really gets to that question. It's a good thing, except that there are no singular voices that are breaking out across culture for the most part that are helping to inform people. Content is not being used in an effective way to create more positive portrayals. And I spend a lot of time working with what's called Gen Z, the 15 to 24-year-olds, and their viewing is scattered across the landscape from Walking Dead to a YouTube video to something they're discovering who knows where. And it's global, and there's no way to really, the programming that they might be watching in large numbers or in what we used to call mass, which really doesn't exist anymore, isn't being effectively communicating new models for healthcare that we should care about. new educational opportunities. 85% of young boys are gaming, but you look at the games that they're playing and they're not being led into that time that they're investing is not positive. We used to require a certain amount of educational television, and when there were just a few networks and you wanted to watch kids programming, you were watching at least a share of Sesame Street and Captain Kangaroo in the old days, but educational.
You're dating yourself
today,
on that.
I know, but
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers
still
is
cool.
relevant.
There you go. Deceased, but still cool.
But that's the point. Deceased, but still cool and needed, and we there's very little coming along to replace that.
Well, I guess my concern is that, certainly the content we see, there's such a variation. Kind of you can divide two of the extremes, and there are multiple extremes. It's not two-dimensional. On the one hand, you have a tremendous amount of diversity in a lot of programming, where you see women, you see people of color, you see television programs led by women. You have someone like Shonda Rhimes, who has done extraordinary things. On the other hand, you look at the gaming that you talked about, still extraordinary, male-oriented, macho, killing, and et cetera, and at a level now, as we enter more and more the VR, the virtual reality world, where, you are in a world where you're totally immersed, and you are literally not only killing people, but the way you do it, the response of your target is becoming more and more human. It's both amazing and scary when you look at that extreme as well. But my overall point was, it just seems to me that it's unhealthy, and all of our cable sponsors will get angry at me perhaps, but for us to be spending so much time on our screens, whether we're adults and seniors, whether we're kids at the age of 6 who have their own iPhones now, or whatever the case may be. And so I'd like your thoughts about that. Is that going to change, or is it going to get worse?
Well, I think we're going to be spending more time on screens because we'll have screens in the cars more than we do now. Screens will be ubiquitous. It's interesting that HBO just had Fahrenheit 451, where your success is defined by how many walls are covered by screens. I actually argue for more screens because I argue for screens in the schools, for gaming in the schools, for remote learning in the schools, remote learning in the homes, for degree-based. We're doing very little in our country, again, to take advantage of this ubiquity of media. And the reality that there are media companies like Discovery that have invested in educational programs. Apple has invested in educational programs. Online, we have things like Khan Academy and other initiatives starting to help young people with reading, especially underserved young people. So I believe if we could find ways to institutionalize putting screens in front of kids in a learning context, that it's very positive for our country.
All right, there's so much I want to cover with you. I know this is only part one of our two-part series, but one of the things you wrote in 1993, one of the lines was, "Business is dead." Tell me what you meant by that. That was such a great statement, but what did you mean?
Well, that was my 1993 book, Ad Bashing, Surviving the Attacks on Advertising, that positioned advertising as at the core of our capitalist economy, and how important it was, and that we were, and the title chapter was Change or Die. The irony is there's a book out by Ken Auletta, the New Yorker columnist on communications, called Frenemies. And it's a book about media today, and in his last chapter, he quotes Bob Greenberg, the head of a top advertising agency called RGA, Change or Die. And that was the end of the Ken Auletta best-selling book, and the very beginning of my 1993 book was Change or Die. And my point was, there are clear warnings on the horizon for the underpinnings of our democratic system, of capitalism, that if we don't begin to address now in media advertising and marketing, we're going to find a collapse of the infrastructure, a collapse of the systems, the processes, and the fundamental business models. And Ken Auletta's book was that made exactly the same point that I made, but saying all these warnings have not been heeded for the last 25 years. So we're in fact seeing the collapse, the consolidation, the contraction, the collapse of advertising-based business models, which will upset your cable advertisers. And it's getting to the point where soon it will be too late if we don't really address some of the technological opportunities that are being presented. But the core broadcast and cable and traditional business models around them, magazines, newspapers, are being absorbed by digital and are being absorbed by, we know, Facebook and Google, but now Amazon, eBay on the horizon, and other digital-based players that are serving marketers in more effective ways.
All right, and I want to ask you, you also talk about kind of the fact that, especially in the advertising industry, how difficult it is for the industry to attract young people. Let's talk about that when we come back, as well as what's the evolution of some of the business arenas you just mentioned. So we're going to take our last break. We'll be right back with Jack in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbortv.com.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
The Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
Join me and watch The Aaron Harber Show.
Watch The Aaron Harber Show.
Watch The Aaron Harber Show.
Watch the Aaron Harper Show.
Watch the Aaron Harber Show.
I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch the Aaron Harber Show and Keep Hope Alive.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbortv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. Remember, this is part one of our special two-part series with media ecologist Jack Myers. So Jack, one of the things you talked about was, how businesses are changing, some are failing, to put it politely, some more quickly than they expected, but also just the advertising industry's inability now and for many years to attract a lot of the young talent. Talk a little bit about that.
There's a talent crisis in not just the media and advertising business, but in many industries. Media and advertising is surprisingly the lowest performer among 15 industries on retaining multicultural talent. It's been reasonably good at attracting young women into the industry. In fact, in the media industry, more than 60% of employees under 32 are female, and they're staying in their jobs longer and more likely to move into senior positions. But on the multicultural side, when they come in as interns, they don't look up and see themselves, see opportunities being created for them. We also are one of the lowest paid for starting jobs. There's an attitude in the industry that if you don't pay your dues for a couple of years and leave, you're not doing the right thing. But yet among Gen Z, this generation's just graduating college, their first job has gone is 9 months, down from 18 months a decade ago for first jobs. And that's across all businesses. We need to create experiences within the industry as opposed to putting them in a small training job and expecting, without giving them a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, which they're looking for. The industry, there are a lot of positive efforts. P&G in the marketing areas has done a good job. Unilever, several companies like Univision and others are really stepping up their game. Agencies are as well. They've been more focused on gender equality, pay equality, than they have been on cultural opportunities. Slowly beginning to solve those problems, but not quickly enough. And the reality in all industries, if media and advertising don't embrace the future population and reflect the population and have a diverse group creating the programs and reflecting the universe they're communicating and advertising to, then the industry will die.
Yeah, they'll certainly have even greater challenges. Of course, if you live in New York today and you want to work for an ad agency, I mean, the cost of living in New York City, you can't be getting paid intern wages. So, I mean, the answer to that's simple. If you want to keep people, you've got to pay them more. And if people are changing jobs, instead of in 1.5 years, in 2/3 of a year, whatever, what that means is that during that 8-9 months, they're spending their time already looking for the next job. So that means you've got them.
And being frustrated by the job they're in because they're not.
So that means you don't
value.
even have them. You're just a temporary way station on the way to the next job.
There are solutions to that.
Well, one is paying people more.
Well, paying people, one of the problems of not paying people more is you tend to define the economic sector that can afford to work for you, those that are also being supported by their parents.
Right. Which also can get into your cultural diversity issue.
And lack of it, exactly. So, but in terms of opportunities and solutions, I recommend that companies come together and 3, 4, 5 large companies in different parts of the industry and collaborate to bring an employee in on a 18-month or 2-year basis and move them from company to company. Verizon does a good job with an Ad Fellows program that brings young people in, and over an 18-month program, they move them from department to department and really immerse them and educate them and involve them. The most important thing I think companies can be doing is asking this young generation who's just joining us for their advice, their counsel. How would they do our jobs? What would they do differently? Learn from them, because they're the ones who understand their generation far more than we could ever hope to.
Well, you know, that approach of asking the people involved seems to be common sense across a number of issues and challenges, but often it's rarely done. So when it is, I think you certainly get a whole new data set that can be helpful. All right, in part 2, one of the things I want to start off and talk about is my sense is that young people actually are going into advertising in very, very great numbers. And I'll explain the basis of that argument when we come back. So make sure you watch part 2 with Jack Myers. Thanks for watching. I'm Aaron Harber. We'll see you next time.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.